Hello. So my name is Zainab Tufekci, and I want to talk about how a combination of business models, how these companies make money, algorithms, what computers can do, and human vulnerabilities have intersected to create a public sphere, a digital public sphere that doesn't really foster healthy conversations. Now, if you've been online, if you go to these platforms, the Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, you realize that a lot of conversations appear to just lead to conflict and tribalization rather than a healthy conversation where people are discussing, deliberating, trying to understand. And that's not a total coincidence. What I would like to do is to try to bring together how that's a function of the design of these platforms. And that design comes from their business model. So let's think about how Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, these platforms, how they make money. Essentially, they're just advertising machines, right? They deliver attention, users' attention, to the advertisers. You go online, you're chatting with your friends, you're seeing stuff, you've got news, but you see ads in the middle. Now, online, ads aren't very effective unless they're tailored and personalized. Let's say they're more effective if they're tailored and personalized. So they also collect a lot of money, a lot of data and information on everyone so that they can sell their ads for more. Okay, so that's the basic business model. Delivering eyeballs, attention, delivering advertisements. The example I want to give is from YouTube's recommendation algorithm. That's my first example. So if you've ever been to YouTube, when you go on the screen, on the right-hand side, there's a sort of this column of recommended videos that play, and that play automatically. You'll just go blink one after another. Now, this is an algorithm that was changed around 2015, and it was replaced by sort of this shiny new algorithm by Google's computer science, machine learning researchers, and they're some of the best in the world. And a lot of the press at the time noted how engagement on YouTube had gone up. And engagement is what Silicon Valley means keeping you on that screen. Right? Because they need to keep you on that screen to deliver more ads. That's the business model. And after YouTube changed its recommendation algorithm, the engagement went up, more money for YouTube. So how does the YouTube's recommendation algorithm work? And what are some of the issues that come with it? For my example, I want to talk about something I was researching in 2015 and 2016. One of the things I study is social movements. And in 2016, Donald Trump was a candidate for the United States presidency, but people did not think it was a serious candidacy. They thought, oh, he's just a celebrity candidate. There's no way he can win. The Democrats, one of the political parties in the US, thought it'll be great if he's the nominee. It'll be very easy to beat. The other Republican competitors thought, oh, this is great because we can beat him easily. But that's not the sense I was getting. I was looking at his online footprint. I was following the social media. I was going to his rallies to observe. And I thought, you know what? The historic moment, the political realignment, the way social media works, the way sort of he's hitting some messages, I don't think this is a candidacy that has no chance. It's not just some celebrity that's going to go away. And I write for the New York Times. I wanted to write a column explaining, here's why you should take this candidacy seriously. It's not just sort of some joke or, something to ignore. So to do that, I wanted to quote him. He had something said he had at the rally that I was at. I hadn't really written it down because I was observing. I'd taken some notes. So I went to YouTube and watched that rally that I had been at to get the wording right. And then I watched a few others to make sure that that he'd said similar things or not. I wrote my New York Times column. My argument was, don't ignore this candidacy. Here's the media environment. That's fine. But then my YouTube lost its mind. it just started recommending very different things to me, just because I'd watched a few of those rallies. And what I noticed is that it started recommending from mild to extreme white supremacist, racist stuff. It was autoplaying it. It started autoplaying, I just let it play, sort of like, oh, what's going on? And it started autoplaying things like the Holocaust in World War II never happened. And these extreme stuff, I thought, close the lid. I don't want to see this. What happened? What happened to my YouTube? So I tried this for other political candidates. I watched some Hillary Clinton. She was a candidate then. I watched some Bernie Sanders. He was a candidate. And YouTube would also recommend more extreme stuff to me. I said, maybe this is something to do with politics. You know, you're just getting recommended more extreme things. So I started doing some experiments. And my two favorite examples of how this works are when I just sort of said, all right, let me watch something about being a vegetarian. And YouTube started recommending and autoplaying videos about being vegan, even more strict. I said, okay, let me watch something about jogging, how to start running, how to jog, how to sort of learn maybe a 5K race. And YouTube started recommending autoplaying ultra marathons, not even regular marathons, these crazy ultra marathons. It was just recommending more and more extreme stuff to me. So what's going on here? How is this possible? And what's the downside? So what's possible here is that increasingly in these online platforms, they're using computer science and machine learning, right? Machine learning is the way current artificial intelligence works, which means they're feeding a lot of data into these algorithms, and these algorithms are then personalizing things one by one by one. So if you want people to watch a TV show, right, you can't really completely personalize it. You can have different channels, but there are only so many channels. Whereas on YouTube, you can personalize screen by screen by screen. And if you have a lot of data, you can personalize person by person. So what the algorithm had discovered was that extremer stuff, or edgier stuff, or conspiracies, or things that kind of engage like that, keep people on the site. Especially if you're a young person, it's more interesting. And then you stay on the site, and what happens is YouTube just serves more ads. Now, to be clear, this isn't YouTube's engineers thinking, let's be terrible people. They have the data, they feed it to the algorithm comes up with what to recommend person by person. But what that means is that if you start from here in the middle, you're quite likely to be pulled to one side or the other, right? So in any society, obviously, disagreement can be very healthy. There are things that we should discuss. People do not have to agree. But you also need some mechanisms to bring people to have maybe consensus on some things, or at least a way to resolve their disagreements. But online, they don't have to have a way to resolve anything. They just have to keep you on the site. It's like a meeting designed never to end. And that's no fun, because the more you keep on there, the more they can serve you ads. Now, similar things are true for Facebook's newsfeed. Facebook's newsfeed is there's an algorithm that decides what to show you out of possible 1,000, 2,000 posts you could be seeing. And the algorithm is designed to keep you there as much as possible. Now, once again, the way to do that is to tailor and personalize to human existing tendencies. As people, right? As humans, we are social creatures. We live in groups. We exist with groups. We bond with our people. This is very normal. This is what people do. But the other side of that process, the sociologists would call that in-group. The other side of that process is conflict and out-group. Getting together with people like you in your in-group is also how people argue and fight with whoever is the other team. And that whole process we do with civilization, with nation building, with institution building, is try to make sure that our out-group conflict is not violent, is not something that destroys us, because it's dangerous. I mean, the way these social media platforms have set things up, they definitely bring people together by giving us ways to bond with each other over things we like. But then they put us onto almost like a boxing ring that's very entertaining. Because arguing with one another and just watching this or being part of it or cheering your team, it's engaging. It's a normal human tendency. And it's a normal human tendency that's being exploited using our data and using computer science algorithms to personalize, simply to keep us engaged on those sites. So it's not creating something from scratch. It's not creating human tendencies that don't exist. I sometimes liken it to a cafeteria where you're only served ice cream and potato chips for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And before your plate is even clear, here comes the recommended next one, and the next one, and the next one. It's a cafeteria that makes money by keeping you there. And a lot of, especially young people, spend a lot of time there. In fact, after I wrote about the YouTube recommendation algorithm, one of the things that happened was a lot of parents wrote to me, and they told me how they had set their kids in front of the NASA channel on YouTube so that the kid could do his or her homework on the moon landing. And 30 minutes later, the kid would come back, "Mom, the moon landing never happened." You know, the Titanic, it wasn't sunk by an iceberg either. The recommendation algorithms had taken them down the conspiracies. Now, why is that engaging? Again, it's a very simple thing. It's a human tendency to be drawn to the interesting, to the novel. And misinformation, conspiracies, fake news, those things are novel. The real stuff tends to be less interesting. It's less surprising. The more surprising something is, the more you're going to be like, "Oh, let me look at this." And the way these platforms are designed, it's not just the way the algorithms personalize. Most everything about their design is there to keep you on that screen. The way they ping you, the way there is the little dopamine hits, as you would think of them when somebody kind of likes something. Ooh, you feel bonding. But it's also very engaging to watch the fight. Now, when we, in our society, when we sort of have political parties, we have sports, we have competition. These are these out-group processes, right? This is what sociologists would call the out-group processes. We're competing. I'm trying to win. I want my team to win. There's nothing wrong with that. What you need, though, is a mechanism that resolves that competition peacefully. When you have competing political parties, that's the election, right? You compete, you disagree, you have panels, you have debates, then you have a mechanism, that's the election. When you have a sports game, right? You compete, you want to win, you have a score, you have rules, you have referees. There's a mechanism that concludes it to an ending where the parties can say, okay, it was a competition, this team won, this team lost. That's what you get with civilization. We have not at all figured that out for our online spaces, and the big companies have no incentive to figure it out, because that would mean that we would be done. And we could close that screen, because there would be a way to resolve whatever was going on. And that's a huge challenge, because they're not doing something very novel, perhaps. TV or newspapers, they also wanted your attention, but they're armed with data and artificial intelligence. And unlike the old traditional public sphere, which was visible to everyone, you don't know what your neighbor is seeing, right? So your neighbor might be seeing something that's getting her very upset and angry, but you don't even know that's there because there's no mechanism to bring people together to counter things. So there might be a lot of healthy things in the new digital public sphere, for sure. It does a lot of good things. It allows people to circumvent censorship. All of that is fine. But it doesn't have that closure, consensus building, decision making, agreeing to disagree but within particular rules, like elections, like games. It doesn't have any of that. So it acts like a centrifugal force. It pushes us into different corners. And those corners are populated with people like us, right? It's our people and it's the other people. And very often, the other side, we encounter them. A lot of people believe that if we only encountered other people's views, things would be better. In fact, there's a lot of concern over what people call the filter bubbles, right? You just hear people like you. But the research shows that's not really what happens online. In fact, Facebook people or, they will tell you, the research shows that we do encounter dissenting or other or counter views, things we disagree with. But we encounter them in a boxing ring set up for us to fight. We don't encounter them in a deliberative setting. So we see the other side, but we're encouraged to dunk on them, to ridicule, or to sort of have a really snappy comeback for our audience, our team. Right? So it's sort of like you're in that boxing ring, and every time you land a good punch, you get the likes and the hearts, and you cheer your own team. And the boxing ring has no 3-minute ring. It's not meant to end. The more you look at it, the more you click on it, the more you participate on it, the better the bottom line of these companies. To fix this would require a top-to-bottom redesign of our digital public sphere. And this is essential, because this is not the first time we've seen technologies, new technologies in mass media, be used in a way that tears people apart. If you look even the history of the United States, some of the earliest movies were very, very racist. And they were used to mobilize the Ku Klux Klan, right? The sort of the white supremacist terrorist group. It was founded again after a movie, The Birth of a Nation, went viral in its day. We have the example of World War II, where propaganda and misinformation and hate speech, all those things we talk about, were integrated with fascist propaganda in Nazi Germany through the medium of films. So after World War II, in the ashes of that conflict, there was a lot of effort and thought that went into how do we design a better public sphere? How do we defang, how do we disarm the power of authoritarian propaganda, the power of hate speech, the power of this conflict and tribalism? And there were a lot of things built, none of which were perfect, but there were a lot of institutions, ways of designing and having ways of mass media operate, from public media to certain rules to different norms, that changed how the public sphere, at least in Europe and US, operated. So we've kind of forgotten that we didn't get what we had before like this. There was major conflict and tribalism and terrible things in the world that in its ashes we learn from. So my plea is that it's not that I'm not aware of the good things, but this time I would like us to take the steps to make this better, not after these centrifugal forces tear the world apart, but before. We should take the warning from the past and realize that every big transition in the public sphere brings its challenges, and we need to address them without waiting for terrible consequences. Thank you.